South Africa is due for an upgrade. About 22 years ago, I got my first cell phone. It was a little Alcatel. It could make calls, receive calls, send texts, get texts, and importantly, play Snake. And if you're laughing, you're showing your age. But you will also know, because of your age, how important that cell phone was for me. It was revolutionary. It wasn't only that I didn't have to sit at my mother's bedside to get a call from my boyfriend. It was a sense of freedom that I didn't have before, a sense of possibilities that I didn't have before. In some ways, it was even a rite of passage into adulthood. It was my liberation. It gave me something I didn't have before. But as much as I loved that cell phone, if today, in the year of our Lord 2024, I pulled it out of my pocket and wrapped in sellotape and probably being held together by elastic bands, I said to you, this is the cell phone I'm still using today, you would mock me, and rightfully so. You would tell me that technology has advanced, the world has moved on, societal needs have changed, and that my needs for what I need in a device have changed. You would implore me to get an upgrade, right? Well, similarly to my liberation experience, about 30 years ago, South Africa got a new operating system in terms of our governance. We got democracy. After hundreds of years of slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and the various oppressions strewn through all of those times, we now got democracy that came with the promise of equality, freedom, dignity, and prosperity for all people. And as simple as that was, as very kind of ad hoc as we put it together, we must admit, and I hope we still admit, that as simple as it was better than its predecessor, which was a crime against humanity. And I hope we remember that. Especially in times like these, where democracy doesn't feel the way we want it to feel. Where we really are having to think about how democracy comes about. Because we're starting to feel like democracy is in crisis in South Africa. And I contend that it is in crisis. I spoke to somebody earlier who said to me that I'm going to have to convince them of that argument. So let's see how it goes. But I don't only think that democracy is in crisis in South Africa. I think it's in crisis the world over. And I think that we might be due for an upgrade. Because we have democracies that are producing outcomes we didn't expect. Elections are producing autocrats. Democratic countries are spurring on wars, and children are dying at the hands of so-called democracies. We have social unrest across the world in various forms. Young people asking to have power in countries that are democratic, that are meant to give them power. Shout out to Gen Z in Kenya. We have to start admitting that something is wrong with the way we're doing democracy. If we are going to reach the SDG 16 goal of a peaceful, just, inclusive world, perhaps we need to start asking ourselves why we don't have a peaceful, just, inclusive democracy. And how do we get there? And so I want to talk about 3 crises of democracy I think we need to confront if we are to change the trajectory that we are on. The first crisis of democracy is a crisis of outcomes. Democracy is just not living up to the promises that it made to us, and especially for a generation of young people alive in the world today. If you are 30 years old in South Africa, the only thing you've known is democracy. Yet you're probably one of the 60% of young people who's unemployed. You may be one of the 6 million people living in a shack dwelling without any services, without any basic dignity. And you may be sending your child, be one of the thousands of people sending your child to a school that has a pit latrine that might kill them. That cannot be the legacy that democracy has for this generation, and that we can't be okay with that. Number one, democracy should not be killing us. Democracy must deliver on development. Otherwise, we are giving democracy a bad name. And so we can't then be surprised when young people who've grown up in democracy have these bad outcomes. Tell us that they're not interested in democracy. Back away from democratic processes. Tell us they're not going to show up for elections. Because it's not just this party or that party. It's the entire edifice that we've created that is not working for everyone. A young man 2 years ago in Umlazi, in KZN, KwaZulu-Natal, for those of you who don't know what KZN is, brought this home to me when he said this, and I quote, he said, "We don't vote as young people because we get the vote, but they get the democracy." And that statement haunts me, because it leads me to the second crisis of democracy I believe we have, which is a crisis of representation. We are voting for people we don't know, who forget about us the minute they get the benefit of our vote. They only seem to talk about us as the collective our people, when actually when they go to do their work, they only think about themselves, their political parties, and their party bosses. They have made democracy into a spectator sport. We have political, social, and economic elites on the field of play, while the majority of people at best are sitting in the stands, if not watching home from the TV, hoping that somebody scores a political goal or economic goal that trickles down to us so that our realities can change. That cannot be democracy. Democracy cannot be the government of the people for the government. It must be the people shall govern, not the government shall govern. And so we have to change that. We have to come up with systems that invite people into their power, not take their power away. But the only way we're going to do that is if we confront the third crisis of democracy, which is the crisis of imagination. It was Margaret Atwood who told us, and I'll paraphrase this, that what oppression takes from us is the gift of imagination. When you're so oppressed, you don't have the space to imagine something different. And I think we've gotten caught in that when it comes to democracy. We are using old systems. Even in decolonial scholarly times, we are using colonial isms to try and understand the world. We are trying to fight old battle of right and left, old ways of thinking about the world for new challenges to create a future that's unknown. We use old electoral systems. We are afraid to talk about anything different when it comes to the judiciary. Nothing can be talked about in ways that are innovative. Everything else in the world is subject to innovation except democracy. Why can we not rethink these systems and ask, are they fit for purpose? And if not, how do we change them? I believe the time has come for those of us who care about the ideal of the people shall govern, to have the courage to say, how do we make democracy better? Otherwise, those who don't care about democracy will use it to kill democracy. I am inspired by the sprouts I'm seeing across the world of different people trying different things. In Slovenia, in the last few years, we have seen a group of gender activists, young gender activists, who have brought a new generation of voters who were disillusioned by a government that wasn't listening, through calling for 4 issue-based referendums. Imagine making politics and democracy about issues again, and actually having people show up for the issues they care about. They called for 4 referendums on the trot until they won enough referendums just so they could get young people excited about voting for something again and used it to vote out a leader they didn't want. We saw it in Brazil. The new Lula moment wasn't about Lula. It was about young civil society activists who decided that they were tired of trying to convince politicians and put themselves on the ballot. And my favorite version of it was when they were putting themselves on the ballot as groups of candidates for 1 seat, not just one candidate for one seat. I love it. And then we have, of course, Gen Z in Kenya, who didn't only take to the streets, because that's the only thing we're talking about, the celebration of their protest. They used their technological advances that have changed their financial system to organize themselves and share information to change a bill and get an entire cabinet fired in a space of a month. There are new ways of doing that are possible if we allow ourselves. At the Rivonia Circle, we've come to see that firsthand in our work. We have done democracy builder workshops where we go into communities for a day and talk about democracy and talk about our challenges, but encourage people to imagine South Africa 2.0 and have people actually in those moments realize that democracy isn't for somebody else, it's for them too. That they have not only the right, but the ability to rethink the world. From that, we've seen 60 projects from 100 communities. One of the projects in Mafikeng, the response to how to govern themselves was a group of young people starting a chicken coop. Now they generate chickens, they get people, it's food security for their community, but it's also jobs for young people. They are governing themselves. In Ivory Park, governing themselves meant a community of people that said, we need safety in our community. So they cleaned up and revived a local park so children don't have to be subjected to the streets that are not being tended to by the municipality, but have a safe place that their community has created for them. One of my favorite examples is in Naturina in the south of Johannesburg, where a community who's been waiting 27 years for a vacant piece of land that government had provided for them and said a clinic would be built. They've been waiting 27 years. Within 5 weeks from that one workshop, not only did they get an actual mobile clinic delivered to their community, in the last 2 years, they have got it staffed, resourced, and that community runs its own clinic now, 3 times a week for 2 years. There is more that is possible if we allow ourselves to dream, to imagine, to believe, and know that there are more of us who can do something, not just the 400 people we gave a little bit of power to a month ago. I know that there are many fights about democracy around the world, many threats to democracy, and the impulse has been to defend democracy. But to defend democracy is limiting because it means that we have to defend what it is or what it has been. And so my cry, my clarion call, is that we don't just defend democracy, but we innovate it. The time has come for democracy's future to be in our hands, for us to change the way we do democracy, and then hope, pray, believe, and trust that we can create things that are new, things that can be a gift to future generations, and show that truly, when we govern ourselves, we are better for it. And so, in the most South African way I could say it, maybe it's time for, in the way we think about democracy, to be able to say, Sizojikizito, wenukalelane, 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 Sizojikizito, wenukalelane, wenukalelane, wenukalelane.